What about now? Anything happening now?
Yes, yeah.
Oh. Right. So now is it moving?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Right, so to recap then, are there any questions about your particular paradigm, your particular ontology, epistemology, and methodology that I can help you with? Or would we like to look at specific projects? Look at specific projects. Okay? I'm not going to do it in any particular order. I'll do it anonymously, so you'll know who I'm talking about that way. Okay, I've got a research question here, which is a qualitative inquiry to identify the barriers in the monitoring of physical health in those with severe and enduring mental health problems. So there's a research question. And the aim is to ask staff working with assertive outreach service to identify the barriers to physical health monitoring in patients on caseload. Okay, so firstly, my question is, what are you trying to find out?
To explore, it's Nikki, by the way,
Yeah.
to explore the awareness to staff of the importance of physical health monitoring and the barriers that stop them doing it.
Okay, but that's not what the aim says.
Right.
Yeah? So what's really important, the research question and the research aim are very much the same thing, but your aim is what you intend to do and what you intend to achieve with this piece of research. So you just said, what did the staff feel and what did the staff know about, and then what were the barriers?
Yeah.
Yeah? So,
yeah.
It's a qualitative inquiry to identify, this is the research question, to identify the barriers in the monitoring of physical health in those with severe and enduring mental health problems. But I'm still not clear exactly what you're trying to discover. Is it particularly the barriers? Because if you were asking what the barriers were for people with mental health problems to accessing services, then you would be asking them people with mental health problems. So who are you asking this question to?
Staff, because there's lots of evidence about how important it is to ask about smoking, ask about drug use, ask healthy living. Yet our organisation doesn't do it. We don't do it everywhere.
Okay.
It's all right, as long as it's not going cold. Stewed. Sorry, I think my microphone's on.
I'm going to mute everybody but Nikki just for a moment, if that's all right. I'm getting general conversation happy. Okay, so Nikki, my question to you is, you're asking the staff something, and it needs to say that in the research aim and the research question. It says it in the research aim to ask staff. So who are you asking? What staff? And what exactly are you going to ask them?
I was going to ask staff within the mental health teams to identify barriers to and suggest ways of improving physical health monitoring in those on caseload.
Okay. So if you wanted to find out the barriers to something, you wanted to find out, what was the second thing?
Suggest ways of improving.
Best ways of improving. What would be the best way to find that out?
Questionnaire and a focus group.
Okay. And in that questionnaire, what are you going to ask them?
I'm going to ask them if they know about the importance of physical health monitoring and what stops them doing it.
Okay. So you are assuming that all staff know what physical health monitoring is?
Well, that's going to be my first question on my questionnaire, that do they know about it?
Right.
So if they don't know about it, then that's one of the barriers, I guess.
Yeah, okay. So if they ask, if you sent it, so you imagine this group of staff and you're not specifying whether they're qualified staff or how long they've been qualified or who the staff are. It's just staff at the moment.
Right, okay.
So you need to be very specific about your sample. If their answer is no,
Okay.
that's not going to take it anywhere, is it? And if the answer...
Well, I guess,
Sorry.
well, I mean, it could take it somewhere, because then the first bit of work is about the education about the importance of the monitoring.
Yeah. Okay. And then would you invite them all to a focus group, or would you invite specific groups of people who had specific information about physical health monitoring to the focus groups?
I would invite a specific group of people within the assertive outreach service, because that's where all the sequence, all of the resources are being concentrated at the moment.
Right.
And they look after the people, I guess, who have got severe and enduring mental health problems, where this is most important.
Good. So are the questionnaire and the focus group related? Are you going to get information from the questionnaire that's going to influence what you're going to ask in the focus group? Or is it going to have an influence on the people that you invite?
Yes. And I'm going to design the focus groups around the 12 domains about influencing practice.
What, so you're going to have 12 focus groups?
Yeah, one focus group, but asking questions in terms of professional role, in terms of barriers, in terms of awareness of the guidance.
Wouldn't that be easier to ask those questions in the form of a questionnaire?
I think it would make the questionnaire very, very long, and I don't know whether, I guess the nitty-gritty, I think, would be easier to get from the focus group.
Okay. Those of you who are thinking about doing a focus group, all of you who are thinking about doing a focus group, there are specific parameters for the kind of things that should be asked in a focus group, and the way to manage a focus group. There's lots of literature out there, especially written by the nurse researcher, looking at how focus groups work and what's the best things to ask them. And the consensus of research information states very, very clearly that if you're going to use a focus group, there needs to be either a consensus of profession, a consensus of group within that explicit group that you're asking. And what I mean by that is, if you're going to get a group of people together to talk about something, they need to have some commonality. So either, you might bring a group of people who are qualified who work in a specific area, or people who've been qualified for a specific length of time. And somebody, we were talking on another day about a group of people who had a specific condition. There needs to be an aspect of commonality when you bring a focus group together. And doing the focus group and managing the focus group is an incredibly complex thing, because you as the questioner has to be very clear about the aims of your focus group, and also you need to have possibly a second person helping you to take notes and manage the situation. So it is a complex research method of data collection. And my concern would be, if you've got to ask all of these questions, then you could have a focus group that became unmanageable.
Right, okay.
How many people would you have in this focus group? how much, how many questions you look at only asking about 6 questions in a focus group, or having 4 to 6 statements for discussion. Otherwise, you could end up having a focus group that went on for hours. So you have to be very, very specific about what you want to achieve in a focus group.
Okay.
Does anybody else, is anybody else thinking of doing a focus group? I've unmuted you all now. Anybody else thinking of doing a focus group interview?
No, what? Sorry? Can't hear you.
Is anybody else thinking of doing a focus group interview?
Only if I get time following my with a group of practice nurses. So it will just, as you said last time, might add a bit of depth to my quantitative piece of work about wound care.
Right. Okay. But in terms of yours, Victoria, you're looking at a very very specific positivist perspective.
Yes.
And so, what would be the value?
I think it was just to discuss the results of the audit work and to find out people's views on that rather than the research.
Okay. I think in terms of your research proposal, although that might be something that your supervisor recommends that you do in real terms for your dissertation, but that will be a conversation for you and your supervisor. I think in terms of your research proposal, you should not necessarily drop it, but think carefully about its inclusion.
Okay.
Just because I think once you have made it very clear what your parameters are for your case study and your research proposal, I don't know whether a focus group is going to answer the questions that you're asking.
No.
Okay. So going back to focus groups as a method of data collection, there's only one, I presume, that's going to use this particular method of data collection. Is that
Yeah.
okay? I will put together some information about focus groups for you.
Thank you.
Because it's a very specific data collection tool.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So one thing Nikki did mention is that she's going to be starting out with a questionnaire. Who else is thinking about starting out with a questionnaire or doing a questionnaire? Anybody else?
It's Sam. I'm doing a quality of life questionnaire along with data collection.
Okay, yeah, Sam, your quality of life questionnaire is an already used, established tool, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So you won't be designing your own questionnaire.
No.
Okay. So there's obviously two sort of different ways, two different things to think about. Is anybody else going to be using an established questionnaire?
Possibly. Kate.
Possibly Kate. Okay. So one of the things to think about, so we'll have two different things. If you're using an established tool, that's a fantastic method of data collection because you've actually got somebody else who's done the work for you. They've got a valid, reliable tool that's out there and it's been tested and we know that it works. You may have to make some personalised adaptations to it. So one thing for you, both Kate and Sam, to think about if you are going to do that is that do you have permission to use it? Is it generally available? And if it's available in the public domain, then you have the ability to edit it to suit your own purposes. If it's not available in the public domain and you're asking somebody's permission to use an established questionnaire, then you will need permission to adapt it as well, which is a simple question to the author. But I think if you're using a quality of life questionnaire, Sam, I believe that one's available in the public domain.
I have to Sorry, it's I have to apply for user agreement as a student, otherwise I'd have to pay £500.
Right, okay. So if you want to make any adaptations to it, you will have to have permission.
Yeah, no, I'm going to use it as it is.
Right, brilliant. Okay, that's fine.
Is that the SF36 or the SF30 that you're using?
Sorry, say that again.
Is it the SF36 or the SF30?
It's available on the public domain, isn't it?
I'm using the Minnesota quality of life for heart failure. It's great.
Right, yeah.
So that's an established questionnaire that Sam and Kate might be using, and so there are specific things to think about. If you are developing your own questionnaire, is anybody thinking about doing that?
Yes.
Yes.
Rachel and Nikki. Okay. Things to think about when you're developing a questionnaire is what turns people off questionnaires is that they are boring, or people reading them don't understand what you're asking. If you've ever been handed a questionnaire or sent a questionnaire and you read the first question and it says something really abstract and you don't know if it's not clear, people won't do it. And we always expect that if you send out 100 questionnaires, you'll only get 40 back. So think about that very carefully when you're designing your questionnaire. The questions need to be simple and it needs to be short, because people will not do it if it's 25 pages long and incredibly complex. Make it as easy as you possibly can for them. And there are lots of very clever tools available on the internet to help you with the questionnaire. SurveyMonkey is one of them, which is freely available and you don't have to pay for it. And that helps you enormously in devising questions and devising strategies to ask these questions. But think very carefully about what you want to find out in your questionnaire. And have very careful questions. If you are trying to test something, then closed questions are really appropriate. Target scale questions are really easy to use. So those kind of questions where you've got very satisfied to very unsatisfied, those sort of Target scale. Rating the significance, rating questionnaires, those sort of things are very useful. But there is specific guidance on questionnaire building, so I'll put together some material for that, Rachel and Nikki.
No, I got myself wrong. I thought you were talking about making up questions for the interview. Sorry.
Okay, you're not doing questionnaire, Rachel, are you?
No, sorry.
No, okay. So what I'll do is on the research design tile, I'll just put a couple of folders which have some information about the different data collection methods, so that you don't have to look at ones that are irrelevant to you. So we've got focus groups, we've got questionnaires, we've got interviews. Anybody doing an interview?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, Rachel.
Rachel, yes. Vicky, yes. Julie, I think you're doing an interview, aren't you?
Yeah.
Who else is doing an interview? Right, so if you're doing an interview, again, think about the questions that you're going to ask. If you're going to do a semi-structured interview, practice asking those questions. One of the things that you've got to be absolutely sure about is that you're going to ask the questions in the same way, so that there is clarity across your methods of data collection. If you have prompts and other additional material that you think that they might need, it needs to be understood. So if you're going to have visual aids or colour coding things or things for them to choose from in your discussion, then have those all ready and prepared. But developing an interview can be quite inductive. So that's where we go back to our perspective and our methodological background, and we have to think about where we're coming from as a researcher. So whether we're coming from an ethnographic perspective, whether we're coming from a phenomenological perspective. Looking at yours, Julie, for example, you're coming at it from a phenomenological perspective. So you're going to be allowing people to tell their story. You're waiting for their narrative account. You won't therefore be asking multiple questions. You may only be asking 3 or 4 with some points to keep people back on track. And there are a number of pieces of material, there are a number of researchers who've written about doing interviews and recording interviews and some of the things that you've got to think about when you interview people. And again, I'll put that material together in the data collection section.
Rachel, I've got a small book called Research Insights by Phil Dillon.
Sorry, I can't hear you, Deb. It's Julie, isn't it? Julie, would you like to say that again? Sorry.
Yeah, I bought a book called Research Insights by Phil Gilham. Have you read that?
I've heard of it, yeah, I've read some of it. Are you finding that one particularly useful?
It was recommended from somebody that had done their masters at work. I haven't read all of it, but I'm sort of looking at it. I just wondered what you thought about it.
There are a number of really good texts about doing interviews. There's one by Hamilton, there's one by Lindy King as well, that she's written quite a lot about doing phenomenological interviews. As I said, I'll put some material together. One of the things about doing interviews is, especially in terms of phenomenological approach, is that you're meant to be immersing yourself in the data. You're meant to be listening to their narrative account and recording it and transcribing it, so that when you are analysing the data, you constantly listen to the recordings. One of the parts of interpretive phenomenology is not just about what they say, it's what they don't say and the way that they say it. So if we're looking at it from a hermeneutic perspective, or whether we're looking at it from an interpretive perspective. So it's about really getting to grips with what people are saying and how they're saying it. And that's quite, it's very in-depth and very immersive.
Rachel?
Yep.
It's Rachel. If you've just said it could be, the interviews could be from an ethnographic or a phenomenological.
Yeah.
Are there any other options, or is that it?
No. I mean, you can purely come from an inductive approach, a qualitative inductive approach. If you're using an interview as part of grounded theory, it's coming at it from a grounded theory perspective. There has just been an awful lot written about doing phenomenological interviews and doing ethnographic interviews. Part of ethnography, and who was coming at it from an ethnography perspective?
I can't hear you.
Sorry?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. You went off into a stream of something.
Sorry. So if you're coming at it from a phenomenological perspective, you're listening to their story. If you are you're doing an interview as part of an ethnographic study, then it forms only part of your data collection exercise. It cannot be the only method of data collection if you're looking at it from an ethnographic perspective. And that's what it's really important to understand. An interview can sit on its own in terms of a phenomenological study, but it can't in terms of an ethnographic study. Do you understand what I mean by that?
I'm not sure where that leaves me when I'm asking just for people's views. Are their views their story?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that makes it sound slightly more simplistic, but if you are seeking to explore somebody's views, somebody's feelings, somebody's attitudes, then you could look at it from a phenomenological perspective, and therefore an interview can sit on its own. But if you are asking somebody's views on something from an ethnographic perspective, then to fully understand what they are thinking and why they are thinking it, would it be enough to just ask them?
Yeah.
Wouldn't we have to either observe them or do some sort of questionnaire?
Questionnaire as well, yeah.
Yeah. So this is where it's so important that you understand, in terms of your research, where you're coming from. What question do you want to ask and what do you want to find out? Because that influences how you're going to ask your participants. So in terms of methodology and methods, in terms of methods of data collection, we've got focus groups, we've got interviews, we've got questionnaires. Is anybody thinking of doing any kind of observation or participant or non-participant observation? You've gone silent. I'm looking through your research ideas. I don't think anybody's thinking of doing any kind of observational study, are they? Okay. Well, I won't talk about participant or non-participant observation if nobody is going to undertake it. So it has specific requirements and it has specific things to think about. So we won't talk about that. Is anybody doing any kind of method of data collection that I haven't mentioned?
This is Sam. I've got I sent you my data collection tool, and I think I'm doing a longitudinal interpretive quantitative study. I think.
You're doing a longitudinal. Say that again. A longitudinal
Interpretive quantitative study.
Okay. Does this does heart rate reduction improve?
Yeah.
Is that you, Sam?
Yeah.
Right. Sorry. When I printed it out, I didn't write your name on it, which is a bit silly. So, Sam, you're doing. I hear your research aim is, as written here, the aim of this study is to look at heart rate reduction in patients with heart failure and see if this has an effect on their quality of life. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So you're going to do a quality of life tool,
Yeah.
and then do something, and then 12 weeks later do the same quality of life tool again. No, you're not. You're going to do it at 4-week intervals. Yes?
So the idea is, I'm not going to do it. The rest of the team in Cornwall are going to do it, but they will pick patients with a heart rate above 70 because that's what the literature says. 0 weeks, and then every 4 weeks for 12 weeks they'll do the quality of life tool and the data collection, so that then it can compare and
So you're fading away on me, Sam. Sorry.
So I thought it would be longitudinal because I'm doing it 0, 4, 8, and 12 weeks.
Right.
So does that make it longitudinal?
If you look at most of the textbooks, they look at a longitudinal study as over 6 to 12 months.
Oh, right. Okay.
So it has a time span element to it, but I don't
Right.
think it's necessarily a longitudinal study as such.
Right. Okay.
Because in terms of methodological function, that is a specific strategy, longitudinal studies.
Right. Sorry, I thought it just meant collection from the same people over a period of time.
Yes, it does, but the suggestion is that it's over an extended period of time, and you've got a 12 weeks.
Yeah.
So I don't think you need to put longitudinal necessarily in there.
Okay.
So you could simply say over a 12-week period.
Okay.
Is it your assumption, therefore, that their quality of life would continue to improve or stay the same?
I think it's very individual because of the nature of the condition.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that I will actually find anything out from my study.
Really?
I hope to, but I think because of the nature of the condition, and that people with heart failure can change from day to day, their quality of life score can change day to day. So but that's what I will use in my conclusion.
Right. Okay. So, are you therefore saying that there are so many variables that influence quality of life that you couldn't pinpoint that a reduction in heart rate is the one thing that does or doesn't improve quality of life?
Yes, that is exactly.
So in a way you have a null hypothesis, don't you?
Yeah. Yes.
So you're coming at this from a very positivist perspective.
Okay. Because there are other things as well. There's other drugs that might have improved their quality of life. They might have had a heart attack, which would then obviously not improve their quality of life. So all of these things cannot be measured for all of the patients. But I'm just looking at the 6 things that can affect the heart rate because that's what I'm looking at.
Okay. And is it your assumption, therefore, that it will improve their quality of life?
Yes. That's what I've seen in practice. That's why I'm looking at this. Pardon?
So anecdotally, you think that there will be an improvement in quality of life?
Yes.
Okay.
What does anecdotally mean?
Anecdotally means that, from your own professional experience, that it is suggested, but you have no clinical or valid evidence to prove it.
Yeah, there's only one trial that's looked at quality of life and heart rate, and
Right.
That's my literature research. That's why I've chosen to do this.
Okay, and what did that find?
That found that it did improve the quality of life, but that was very drug-based on one specific drug, whereas I'm looking to see whether it could be weight loss or different drugs or not smoking and exercise. So there's 3 pharmacological and 3 non-pharmacological aspects.
So, is it my understanding, therefore, that there are 6 variables that you're looking at?
Yes.
That's quite a lot of variables.
But yes.
Does every patient have just one of those variables?
No.
Okay. Do you see my...
Yeah, my literature research showed that these 6 variables can reduce heart rate for heart failure patients. So therefore, and they're the 6 most common. So they're the ones then that I'm going to look at. But if somebody's on a beta blocker, they won't necessarily be on ivabradine and digoxin.
Right.
They won't have given up smoking if they've never been a smoker.
Right. Okay.
So
does
that make sense?
This is where, for all of you now, not just Sam, is to think about your sample. So when you're looking at who you're going to actually be sampling, why are you choosing particular people? So for you, for you, Sam, you're coming at this from a very positivist perspective. Therefore, you are going to be using what kind of sampling strategy?
My sampling is that the other cardiac nurses in the clinic are going to, over the 12-week period when they see the patient, anyone who's got a heart rate over 70, they will do the research on them.
Oh, I lost you then, Sam, at the end there.
So I've spoken to, there's about 13 cardiac nurses, can you hear me? In Cornwall, and they all agreed to do 3 or 4 patients, if possible. So when they start the trial, they will identify anyone with a heart rate above 70 and then do the research on those patients. But that's the only inclusion criteria, is that their heart rate has to be over 70.
Okay, right. So there'll be no randomisation, and there'll be the only inclusion criteria is that they're accessing this service and they've got a heart rate of above 70.
Yeah.
Are you going to have no exclusions to that?
No, because all of the research that is done is whether it's an acute heart failure, whether it's chronic heart failure, there's age restrictions and there's ejection fraction restrictions, whereas I want to just look at heart rate. Okay. They have to have heart failure and have a heart rate above 70.
And have a heart rate, yes. Okay, so what sort of sampling do you think that is? That's non-randomised, convenient sampling, isn't it?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
It's non-randomised, convenient sampling.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, my issue is that if this is a positivist research proposal, using non-randomised convenient sampling, are you going to be able to answer the question that you've asked?
With the data that is collected, because they will do the data collection tool which is what is their heart rate and actually I didn't put that on there. What's their heart rate and whether medications or smoking status has changed, and then alongside the quality of life questionnaire.
Okay.
And again in 4 weeks, so then you'll have a correlation. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, that's your data collection strategy, so that there'll be phases of data, and you'll have one, and then you'll have the next one 4 weeks later, and the next one 4 weeks later. Yeah. But in terms of answering your question, because your question was you had a null hypothesis at the beginning, which said, does heart rate reduction improve quality of life for patients with heart failure? So yes, we've got an inclusion criteria if they've got to be in heart failure. Are there going to be parameters for that?
No, they have to. The inclusion criteria is we only see people who have a diagnosis of heart failure.
Okay, so you've got a ready-made group of people because they're accessing your service, so they have heart failure. So that's one of your inclusion criteria. They've got a pulse rate above 70, and they are saying yes to be participants in your study.
Yep.
But there'll be no randomisation.
I thought that it would be randomised because I'm not doing it.
What does that? Well, why does that make it randomised?
Because the other nurses will pick who's going to be on the because they might have 8 patients who can do it, but they can't do it on 8 patients, so they'll pick which ones, I suppose.
And what will be the parameters for them picking them?
No, I don't know.
Right, you need to think. You need to think through about a set of criteria so that you can have all of the nurses in your team, including them for the same reasons and excluding them for the same reasons. So
Okay.
maybe you want to pick an age range or pick a male versus female, or maybe you want to pick something that includes and excludes them. Because as you said, if they have 8 patients, they can't do it on all 8. What's going to be the inclusion and exclusion criteria for them picking one patient that day?
I suppose there will be, the fact that they consent to do it. Out of the 8, only 5 might consent to do it, and then their ability to do it as well. Some people, can't read or don't understand questionnaires, that kind of thing.
So that's got to be in your inclusion and exclusion criteria.
Yeah.
Okay, so you need to spell it out exactly what would exclude somebody from the study and what would include somebody from the study.
Okay.
And by that, you are making sure that you have got the same group of people being researched and the same parameters for inclusion.
Right.
And in a positivist study, it's really, really important that we have that kind of structure.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
So you have to think through what other sampling strategies that you might have.
I don't want to take. My problem is I don't want to make it gender specific or age specific, because that's what happens all the time. So I want it to be literally, the first patients that the nurses see with a heart rate over 70 are included, who are willing to do it and able.
Okay, so that's convenience sampling, isn't it?
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, but my concern is that if you are asking a positivist question, there needs to be a much more structured inclusion and exclusion criteria. Otherwise, you are not fulfilling the parameters of the research that you're undertaking.
Can I do it in a timeline so that when it starts, so that they include anyone who is able and consents to within a week?
Yeah, absolutely. But that's got to be in your structured inclusion and exclusion criteria. So maybe one of the things that you say is that the capture of participants will occur in week commencing whatever date. And so there will be an element of convenient sampling to your positivist study.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
Yeah?
Yes. Okay. Because that's what I will have to do anyway, so...
Yeah, and in real terms and in practical terms, we often make these adjustments to our research, but it's got to be very clearly stated in your limitations of your study that was the group of people that you were asking.
Okay.
Otherwise, somebody reading this research proposal would say, but that doesn't answer the question. That doesn't answer that research question. Because you've started with a null hypothesis that you are seeking to prove or disprove something. And you can't seek to prove or disprove something with that kind of broad sampling strategy.
Okay.
Yeah?
Sorry, somebody just at my door.
Don't worry.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to unmute you all now just for a little bit and say, we talked a little bit, Sam and I were having a discussion there about sampling strategies. So I just wanted to make sure that all of you were completely clear, and if any of others of you had any specific questions about sampling.
Rachel, it's Julie.
Hi there.
Hi. I'm doing purposive sampling.
Yep.
Up to 6 couples. However, I won't potentially be doing it saturation just because I've been advised by you not to do too many interviews.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm reading about you need to reach, saturation, what happens if I actually don't and I've only interviewed that many?
Well, that's the thing, because you've chosen that specific, and I've unmuted the rest of you, so I'm just talking to Julie at the moment. That's one of the key principles of phenomenological research, is that we don't I say we because that's the research that I've predominantly undertaken in my career. We don't predetermine our sample size, and whereas I was just saying to Sam she needs to be much more structured in her inclusion and exclusion criteria and have numbers, and because she's coming at it from a positivist perspective, because you're coming at it from an interpretive phenomenological perspective, your whole principle is that you are seeking to explore a set of ideas, and that therefore once you've interviewed 4 couples, you might find that no new information is coming up, and that's what we call theoretical saturation. I mean, 4 might be a slightly small number, but it might only take 6. But what we employ in that is something called a constant comparative method. Have you read anything about that?
No.
Okay, well, if you look at constant comparative methods and constant comparative analysis, which is written up in many of the research textbooks, but particularly one of them in your research list is Pollitt and Hungler, the research methods. They have a section. Pollitt and Hungler, it's on your reading list.
Pollitt and Hungler.
Hungler, Hungler. It's a research textbook on your reading list. It talks about constant comparative methods. So whereas, and I'll use Sam as an example again, is that she is going to collect her data, finish collecting her data, and then analyse her data. You aren't going to do it in that way. You are going to interview, analyse, interview, analyse, interview, analyse. So it's much more of a cyclical approach to your research. That you predetermine your questions for your interviews, but there may again be some adaptation to your questions as you move through the data collection phases. That's where it sits quite nicely with, for example, grounded theory, which uses that very much inductive principle, that you don't start with everything set in stone. So whereas somebody coming at it from a positivist perspective will need a predetermined sample size, you won't. And you will be saying things like, I will interview, or the research will undertake 4 to 6, 6 to 8 interviews. Because you don't know how many it's going to take until you reach theoretical saturation. But Sandalowski, and that's another article that's on your reading list, talks an awful lot about how you establish validity in qualitative studies, and looks at the principles of constant comparative methods and constant comparative analysis.
But because we're so, we've got time constraints upon us, Rachel. I mean, I'm sort of looking at my study as a pilot for a bigger study.
Absolutely.
Because I think when I first said to you, you sort of said to me, if I did more than 4, then it would be more like a PhD because I wouldn't have time to transcribe and write up.
Yeah.
But what's occurring is, what if I don't get that data that I need from those 4 couples and I'll run out of time? That makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. No piece of research is perfect, Julie. So it might be that you don't achieve it in the time span that you've got it. That doesn't make the research fail. It makes the time span fail.
But would you still pass your master's?
Oh yeah, you'd still pass it because your research is still sound, but it doesn't. But that's the other thing about interpretive phenomenological research, is that there isn't necessarily an end point. So at a point in your research, you say, I have stopped now because this is what I found out so far. It might be that your recommendations are extensive further research.
Right, okay.
That's sort of where we come to a slight difference in the fact that this is a piece of research for academic achievement rather than a piece of research for research's sake.
Right.
Yeah? And there has to be a point where your supervisor, who'll be Heather, says, I know you haven't got all the answers yet, but you have got to stop because you've got to get on. And that's just in the same way as you do with a literature review. There is a point where you've got to stop literature searching and deal with the information that you've got. And it might be in terms of your thematic analysis that you can only pursue a couple of the themes and that the other themes are left for further research. That doesn't stop you getting a very good mark in your masters, but in terms of research, it isn't a full stop.
Okay. So can you actually say in your proposal that you're anticipating that it could be a pilot study for a bigger study?
It's not a pilot study because you're doing phenomenological research. A pilot study is language that's used particularly for a positivist research. So a pilot study is something that we use to test the methods of a bigger study. So what you could say is this is an investigative piece of work to set the scene for further research. It's different language because you are not doing a quantitative piece of research.
Sure.
Okay?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So in terms of your sampling, you will be looking at purposive sampling, which is a very widely used sampling strategy, which is employed in inductive research, especially in research that's using phenomenological perspectives. So there's purposive sampling, and that's exactly what it says on the tin. You're picking these people on purpose. You're picking them because of something that they know, something that they've experienced, and that's what you're researching.
So with that, Rachel, what I'm planning to do, because I was speaking to my boss, and he said that if I design a letter and put it through ethics with my proposal, he will introduce me to the patient so that I get a quicker uptake.
Okay.
Is that all right to do that?
That's absolutely fine. I mean, somebody else asked about gatekeepers to research samples, and Sam was already talking about how she's going to employ the rest of her team to access her sample. Others of you might need to go to, and you're using your consultant as a sort of introducer, a little bit like a sort of a dating agency principle. But others of you may need to go to other different gatekeepers of your sample to isolate exactly who you're going to ask and where you're going to ask them. And it doesn't really matter what way you get at them as long as it's ethical.
And in my proposal, do I say that, I mean, when I go to local ethics, so I go to university ethics first, but when I go to local ethics, I'm going as an amendment to an existing study. How would I put that into my proposal?
Don't worry about that in terms of your research proposal for this particular module. That's not irrelevant, but that's something you'll take further when you and Heather move this study forward as part of your dissertation module. In terms of this, just write about going through ethics generally, in general principles.
But it will be okay to do that?
Yeah, it should be fine. I mean, there's no reason why you can't go as an amendment to another study in terms of in reality, but I wouldn't mention that in terms of this particular assignment.
Okay, thank you.
But we will talk in more depth next time about ethics specifically. We're going to focus on ethics next time.
Okay, thank you.
So other forms of sampling strategies that we might employ, we've talked about purposive sampling a little bit. We've talked about convenience sampling, and that's, again, exactly what it says on the tin. You're accessing these people because of convenience. And then there's also the idea of theoretical sampling. So theoretical sampling is you're accessing people, you're asking people the questions because of what they know. And so in qualitative research, often we employ a mix of sampling strategies. So it's not just purposes. It could be convenient purposive sampling. It could be theoretical convenient sampling, and so on. So there's a mix of these principles that allows us to get the people that we are after. So in
Mine's convenient, isn't it?
Pardon?
Mine would be convenient purposive, because they're patients that are coming to the craniofacial unit.
Yep, absolutely. So you've got the convenient sampling strategy there, and you've got the purposive sampling. So yeah, it's a combination of the two. And this is where we differ greatly from quantitative or positivist research, because that's when it is much more about randomization and inclusion and exclusion criteria. And there will be a degree of inclusion and exclusion criteria associated with our qualitative research sample, but not such stringent objective viewpoints. Okay. So we've talked about methodology, we've talked about methods of data collection, we've talked about sampling. Any questions so far? Okay, so then we've got to talk a little bit about, and in this sort of section of your project, we'll be looking at your data analysis and how you propose to analyse the data that you've collected. And this will be very much influenced by the methodology that you've chosen. For those of you who have chosen to do a phenomenological piece of research, or an ethnographic piece of research, or an inductive qualitative piece of research.
Rachel, I can hardly hear you again. You just seem to keep fading.
I'm not moving, so I'm not sure whether it's just the networking.
It's like you're talking through water.
I'm not, I promise.
You're not in the bath.
I'm not in my bath, no. Strangely. I think it's just got to do with bandwidth and all of those sort of bits of information that I don't really understand. I'm not sure whether my voice is clearer when I've muted you all.
Yes. I think it is, Rachel.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well then, I might mute you all again then. Right, you're all muted. I can't hear any of you now. So we've talked about data. We've talked about methodology. We've talked about methods of data collection. We've talked about a little bit about sampling. And we've talked about data analysis. It is quite difficult in your research proposal to talk about how you will go about analysing data that you haven't yet collected. But that's exactly what I need you to do. You need to outline exactly how you are going to manage the data that you collect. So for those of you that are doing a focus group or an interview, you will outline exactly how you are going to record, transcribe, and then manage the data that you've collected. And some of you, well, all of you have already done a thematic analysis of the literature. And some of you may employ that strategy to manage the data that you're collecting. So you may be doing a thematic analysis. Therefore, you will be going through the transcriptions of your material that you've collected from your recipients, your participants, and you have be looking for certain themes. You might do a content analysis, so you might be looking for specific content. You might be doing a theoretical analysis, so looking for specific aspects of theory. You might also be looking for, you might be using hermeneutic phenomenology, for example, where you'll be looking at specific uses of language. So all of these different methods of analysis match your methodology. And this is where, again, I know I've said it before, that if you're clear about your methodology, the analysis will be obvious. If you're doing a questionnaire, again, if you've got open-ended questions, you might do a thematic analysis of those open-ended questions. If you have got closed questions, then there will be some sort of statistical or numerical description of the information. And that might be as simplistic as percentages or mean, medians and modes, where you have charted exactly where the responses have come from. Don't get too concerned about those sort of statistical tests. It's not anything to worry about. Your supervisors, when allocated, will help you with those, and we've got specific tutors on staff who are very good at particular types of statistics. But if you've collected a questionnaire, even if you are coming from a qualitative perspective, a phenomenological, an ethnographic perspective, you might have a limited amount of numerical analysis to your questionnaire if you've done a questionnaire. And it is important that in your research proposal, you outline exactly how you are going to manage that information and manage that data. Be very aware of how long this takes. So do not propose to do something that's going to take an awfully long time. I don't think it's very difficult to know how long this is going to take you. And for those of you who've ever done an interview, an hour's interview probably takes about 3 hours to transcribe, if not longer, depending on how fast you are at typing. And it probably takes you another 4 hours to properly analyse it. So you're looking at an enormous amount of time. So be realistic in how you can manage your data. So I'll just unmute you all again and see if you've got any questions. Data analysis questions, anybody?
You would code before you do the thematic analysis, would you?
So, yes, you might use some sort of coding strategy, depending on what you're looking for. So if you're looking for particular language, particular themes, particular mentions of certain things. I mean, lots of people do their analysis in many different ways, whether they code theirs using colours or cut and paste particular phrases. When you're presenting your data, when you're writing up your dissertation, if you've used a phenomenological approach, you'll want to enrich your data findings with the presentation of quotes and passages from your interview. So it's a useful way of doing it. You know, very complex computers. I colour-coded all of mine with lots and lots of different highlighter pens and looked for particular coding strategies, and I had pink meaning one thing and green meaning another and blue meaning something else. With the computers now, it's so much easier to phrase things and code things. In terms of this is where you go back to your literature, and that might be an indicative list of codes that you might be looking for. But when I say it takes 3 hours to analyse a 1 hour interview, that's what I mean by that sort of coding or whatever strategy you decide to employ to analyse your data. It takes a long time to type up a 1 hour interview. Any other questions regarding analysis?
Sam, would mine be descriptive analysis then? So because I would show it either in scatter charts or bar charts.
Yeah, so you're going to be presenting your findings with some sort of, whatever you decide, some descriptive statistics. They may form pie charts, they might form percentages, they might form graphs. You're going to have to look at some inventive ways of presenting your findings, and then you're going to be analysing your findings in terms of what you found.
Okay.
So that's where, when we come to write up our dissertations, we've got our presentation of findings and then analysis of findings. And in qualitative research, presentation of findings tends to be a very short section, whereas in positivist research, presentations of findings tends to be quite a large section. What you don't do in qualitative research dissertations is you don't present all of your interviews, all of your transcriptions. So depending on the perspective that you're coming from will depend on which section of your findings chapter has more weight. But in your research proposal, all I want you to do is outline how you're going to go about this. Okay. Any other questions on analysis?
Rachel, you said you would find an example of a proposal just for us to read how it was sort of laid out.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I will try and find a good one.
You know, when you're writing all these things that you've said, are you writing and then are you referencing from the literature, in that if, you know, everything that you say in your proposed, I don't know, if you're talking about how you're going to sample, do you then have to explain what purposive sampling is with something out of a research book?
Yes, absolutely.
So you just write what you're going to do.
You write what you're going to do, but then you validate what you're going to do with, you support what you're going to do with a reference from the research literature, whether that be one of the research textbooks or one of the articles. And there's so much written about research strategies out there that, you know, to produce you a reference list would be thousands. But if you search purposive sampling, for example, you will come up with loads of evidence to support why it's a useful mechanism of sampling in a particular type of research. So you are supporting the way you are going to go about your research with research literature, because it matches what you're asking. Does that answer your question?
And is that for literally everything that you say? Because I'm just thinking of the word count. It's going to really eat into your word count, isn't it?
Yes, but you wouldn't, at this level, you wouldn't write something without referencing it. This will probably have a lot more research references in it than subject-specific references. You're going to need to go to whichever research textbooks you've decided to use. There's, you know, many on the reference list, but there's also equally more in the library that are very good. But the Nurse Researcher, Nurse Education Today, Advanced Journal of Nursing, all have written many papers on research methods and research methodologies, particularly the Nurse Researcher. And if you go to the Nurse Researcher, they have written, I mean, they have editions which are focused on each of the particular sampling strategies, each of the particular methods of data collection. They have a whole book on focus groups, for example. So there's plenty out there written to support what you're talking about. Yes, it will have an impact on the word count, but that's where you're going to need to be succinct. Any other questions? I'm just, hopefully you can see this. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. I've just gone back to our research guide, your research proposal guidelines, which are on the DLE. You've got your outline, you've got your research proposal section for 55 marks. So if you look at what we've talked about today, this is the bulk of this, well, the 55% is what we've talked about today. We've got our core aims, stated objectives, we've talked about our methodology, so that's your philosophical underpinnings. We've talked about your methods of data collection, so the appropriate method of data collection that fits the strategies. So keep going back in your mind, saying to yourself, will this method answer the question that I've asked? A plan from your investigation, and all I want there is a Gantt chart which outlines exactly how you're going to go about it and when you're going to undertake these phases. And I don't want specifics like on January the 2nd I will be doing X. But some idea in your mind, for those of you who are going to hopefully start your dissertations in September, October, when you are going to try and undertake certain phases of your data collection. And I know this is all going to be dependent on passing this and getting ethics and all that, but just some idea of when you're going to do phases. So for you, Julie, it's going to be much more of a phased cyclical approach. For you, Sam, it's going to be very much, I'm going to start my sampling week here, and then it'll be 4 weeks from then, so that you've got an idea of how you're going to map out this project. You might want to put that in a text box or in a chart or in something very visual in your appendix. And there are examples of Gantt charts online that you can look at that give you a lot of help in how to lay them out. And then a section on your analysis, and this addresses the issues surrounding how you're going to propose to analyse the data that you've collected. Okay? So this is the bulk of your research proposal in terms of this assignment. But also it's the bulk of the information that will sit with your research ethics approval. So as I said to you earlier, we're going to focus purely on ethics next time. We're going to be talking specifically about ethical considerations and ethical ideas and looking at specific, having received your designs, your aims and your objectives, we're going to be looking at some of the possible ethical considerations that we might have to come think about. This is not going to be, I'm not going to be looking at local ethics committees particularly. I'm going to be looking at broad ethical consideration. Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, Rachel, you said at the beginning that you would get in touch with Marie, or I can't remember her name, to try and find out for us when we would have to come for face-to-face in September. I've got, I really could do with knowing because of my work commitments.
Oh, what, in terms of your dissertation module?
Yeah, you said that some of it might be face-to-face.
Some of it is face-to-face. It's Jenny Morris's module.
How can we find out some dates, if possible, or some rough dates so that I can avoid what I'm doing at work?
I will see if Jenny's got her dates.
Thank you.
I will speak to her tomorrow because we're in a meeting tomorrow. So I will speak to her tomorrow and then I'll put it in an email to everybody just so that they know. I know not everybody in the group is going to go on and do their dissertation next year. but some of you are. So I'll just put it in I'll get Jenny to either email it or I'll do it myself.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Rachel, it's Sam. I'm just wondering, is my study will be positivist? Could it also be interpretive?
Sorry, I didn't catch all of that. Sorry.
My study will be positivist.
Yes.
Can it be interpretive as well?
No. In answer to the question, no. I mean, what you could come at a question from a positivist perspective and employ some interpretive. Oh, sorry. And employ some interpretive perspectives to answering your questions, but you have to come at it from one perspective or another. You can't be both.
Okay, thanks.
So you could employ some interpretive strategies, but it would be a positivist question.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have, but you said you'd phone at the end, so.
Okay, yes. Just drop me a quick email though, Julie, with the best number to get you on. I'll go back to the office and phone you.
Okay, I'll do that now.
Okay. I'd just like to say to all of you before I close, it's although we've got these sort of structured afternoons of webinaring, I'm not sure that is a verb. That doesn't mean I'm not available for any kind of question and answer sessions in between. I do want this to be a slightly more interactive module than the last one was, with me delivering specific sessions on specific days. You can access me at any time and I'll get back to you. As I said to you last time, the next session, which is on the 1st of June, is going to be purely dedicated to ethics, and we'll be looking at ethical considerations. I was hoping that one of our professors would be available to help. I'm not sure that she is now, so it might just be me again. We won't be looking at specific local ethics committees. We'll be looking at general principles, but any specific questions, we'll make it interactive so that it's broadly relevant to all of you. Those of you who emailed your research ideas, thank you very much. Some of you have highlighted exactly who your supervisor either is or you'd like them to be. Some of you didn't mention a supervisor idea in. So if you do have any supervisor requests, then let me know so I can check, see their availability, and also let Jenny know that supervisors have been identified. Yeah, and I think that's about it for now. Any other questions?
It's Rachel.
Hi, Rach.
On the Moodle site, quite a lot of the folders seem to be empty on my Moodle site. There's lots of stuff in introduction.
Is that the one with the pictures? Is that the one with the
Sorry?
pictures?
Coffee.
Sorry.
There's nothing in developing the research question. Is that right? Am I not in the right one?
Has that got the pictures on it or not?
Yeah, no pictures. I'm in the wrong one.
Yeah, you're in next year's. But as I said,
I was in the wrong. I can't find the pictures one.
you can't find the pictures one.
No, it's not on my list. It was,
Oh,
so it should be there somewhere.
okay. I'll check. Make sure you're still in the room.